Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Squared Circle Calendar. On this episode, we're going to be looking back to July of 1975 and all the happenings in the world of pro wrestling at that time. So, without no further ado, let's get started here. First off, um, let's look over to Japan. As you know, Japan was a big deal. As always, has a big pro wrestling deal. As I've mentioned before, of course, the way Japan does their shows, they do them as touring series. So of course, you had the three major companies of Japan at the time: International Wrestling Enterprises, aka the IWE, New Japan, and All Japan. And of course, they do them through series, through a touring series. So during throughout the month of July, IWE was holding its big summer series. New Japan was holding its summer fight series, and then All Japan was holding its summer action series. So among the gaijin talent that would be engaged in each of these series, for the IWE Big Summer Series, you had you had Big John Quinn coming over to Japan from Stampede Wrestling in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, um, having most recently held the Stampede International Tag Team Championships with Mr. Hito prior to him coming over to Japan. And then you had from coming over from World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico, you had Gil Hayes and the Commandos, in which um, both sets of teams of Hayes and Quinn and the Commandos would each be pursuing, of course, the IW. Well, they called their versions as well the IWA. The IWE's World Heavyweight and World Tag Team Championships were actually called the IWA World Heavyweight and World Tag Team Championships, with the Commandos and Hayes and Quinn both pursuing pursuing the IWA Tag Team Champions, Great Kusatsu and Mighty Inoue, as well as Big John Quinn pursuing the IWA World Heavyweight Championship held by Russia Kimura. Also, as another little feature throughout much of the month, one half of the NWA World Women's Tag Team Championship, Joyce Grable, was also on tour there, engaging in a singles rivalry with Dottie Downs, which they would exchange some with Joyce Grable taking the majority of the matches. You know, they would also at the very beginning team up to face off against Chio Obato and Terumi Sakura. And during the summer fight series in New Japan, the Gaijin talent that would be included would include from Maple Leaf Wrestling in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, would be the likes of Alibaba, Bull Gregory, E.A. Poisson, um, those would be the individuals who primarily, and then also coming from the International Wrestling Alliance based out of Ohio. This is the wrestling organization that came up out of the ashes of the NWF when they closed down late '74. Were Brute Bernard and Hans Schmidt, as they would, of course, be engaging in feuds with the likes of Antonio Inoki, Seiji Sakaguchi, and Strong Kobayashi. And then, as we go over to All Japan, among the gaijin talent that would that would come over for the Summer Action Series tour would include Bobby Duncum Sr. representing the WWF, um, Jerry Briscoe representing Georgia Championship Wrestling, Ricky Gibson, the older brother of Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express fame, representing Southeast Championship Wrestling. Killer Carl Cox, under a mask, calling himself the Spirit, coming over from Big Time Wrestling in Detroit. Also, Fritz von Erich, at the time the NWA American Heavyweight Champion, would come over to challenge Giant Baba for the PWF, Pacific Wrestling Federation Heavyweight title. Have some matches there, along with Chavo Guerrero coming out of Southern California here, NWA Hollywood, and Bob Remus, who most of you would remember better as Sergeant Slaughter earlier on in his career, coming over to Japan from Portland Wrestling. So those are all the Gaijin talent who would come over to face off against the likes in All Japan, the likes of course Giant Baba, Jumbo Tsuruta, Akihisa Takachiho. Of course, many of you would know him better as the Great Kabuki. The tag team of Great Kojika and Mutoshi Okuma, and of course the American transplant, the Destroyer Dick Bear. So as we now, of course, venture west to Canada, first we'll start off up north in Canada, in which one of the big stories out of the Maritimes provinces, Leo Burke and Bulldog Bob Brown were engaging in a feud with each other over some of the Maritimes titles, including the Eastern Sports Association, the Maritimes provinces versions of the Tate. Okay, so the Tate Fist title. They were fighting over the Tate Fist title and the Maritimes version of the North American Heavyweight Championship. So they were going back and forth with each of them at one time holding both titles during this time. And then as we head out further west to Alberta and British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan area where Stampede is located. One of the big stories coming out of there for the first 2 weeks of July had both the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Jack Briscoe and the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title holder Hiro Matsuda on tour there in the first 2 weeks, in which they were both defending their respective titles. Jack Briscoe would defend the NWA World Heavyweight title against the likes of the Stampede North American Heavyweight Champion Curtis Iaukea, as well as Dan Kroffat and Dan Kroffat, and then of course Hiro Matsuda would be defending his title against primarily the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title against Keith Hart, of course the older brother of Bret and Owen Hart of WWF fame. Then, of course, during the latter 2 weeks of towards the end of July, you'd have Jack Briscoe also defend the NWA World Heavyweight title in the Vancouver area in the British Columbia territory, defending against the likes, of course, of Dale Lewis and Ormond Malumba, and then also coming back from Japan as well, Joyce Grable and Dottie Downs would continue their rivalry in the in the Canadian Pacific Northwest area. And as we come down into the States, of course, okay, so now as we come to the WWF, WWF at the time, of course, um, the Valiant brothers were on their way out. Their contract was coming due, and they were on their way out of the WWF as the Blackjacks were coming in and were about to win, about to become top contenders to the WWF World Tag Team Championships. At this time, of course, what was happening also in the WWF in the tag team scene was the reigning tag team champions were Dominic DeNucci and Victor Rivera, but Rivera would leave during the month. He would forfeit his half of the WWF World Tag Team titles, and then the WWF at the time would allow Dominic DeNucci to pick a new partner to replace Rivera, in which he picked Irish Pat Bennett to be his tag team partner, and they would, of course, start a feud in which they would defend the titles against the Blackjacks, led by WWF Hall of Fame manager Captain Lou Albano. Also, during this time, Bruno Sammartino was continuing to defend his title against, primarily against Fred Blassie's men of Spiros Arion and Waldo Von Erich, as well as defending it against George the Animal Steel, who I believe was managed at this time by the Grand Wizard. His title defenses, including a cage match title defense against Spiros Arion in Boston on the 19th, in which he would retain the title. And then as we head down to the Mid-Atlantic area, where following his defeat on June the 29th, I believe, following following losing the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship to Wahoo McDaniel, on July the 3rd, Johnny Valentine would beat Harley Race for the Mid-Atlantic version of the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. And he would hold that title until being forced to retire in October due to the plane crash that happened on October 4th. And I'll talk more about that when we talk October of 75. So, and then as we head down to Georgia, of course, the reigning NWA Georgia Heavyweight Champion, Abdullah the Butcher, would exchange the title with Mr. Wrestling 2, as he would drop the title to Mr. Wrestling 2 on the 4th, only to regain it back on the 11th. Also going on in Georgia at this time, Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater had come up to Georgia from Florida under the management of Gary Hart, in which they would, of course, start winning titles throughout Georgia, including the Dick Slater himself would win the Macon Heavyweight and the Columbus Heavyweight championships, and then, of course, as a team, Orton Jr. and Slater would win the Columbus Tag Team Championships and the Georgia Tag Team Championships. As we move on to the Gulf Coast territory, we would see that Ken Lucas would continue his dominance in the territory, as having held a number of regional titles, including the Pensacola Heavyweight Championship, the Panama City Heavyweight Championship, and the Mobile City Heavyweight Championship. as well as teaming with Nick Kozak, who came in to the area from West Texas, from the West Texas territory, Western States territory. Um, they would team up together to defeat the Bounty Hunters for the NWA Gulf Coast Tag Team Championships. So, and then as we move up into Tennessee, into the Tennessee area, first head over to Knoxville, over into the Southeast Championship Wrestling territory, run by Ron Fuller. Is Ron Fuller and the Assassin would win the um, Tennessee tag team titles during this time. And also, as we head over more to as we head more into the Mid America territory in Central and Western Tennessee, we head into the Central and Western Tennessee territory of NWA Mid America. The territory would welcome back Jerry Lawler after having been banished from the territory for about the last 8-9 months to Georgia due to some issues on booking that Lester Welch, Jerry Jarrett, and a few others didn't care for. So he was now brought back, and he would be engaging in a feud with the Mongolian Stomper, Archie Goldie, led by, of course, Bearcat, his manager Bearcat Wright, in a feud for the NWA Southern Heavyweight title. Also, during this time, Sam Bass was leading the tag team of um, Otto von Heller and Carl von Steger, as they were holding both the Mid America versions of the NWA United States Tag Team Championships, as well as the Mid America version of the NWA World Tag Team Championships. As we head up north a bit more to Michigan, we come upon Big Time Wrestling in Detroit, in which manager Saul Wangeroff would help to ignite a feud between the Poffos and the Islanders, aka the Wild Samoans, as he would leave the Poffos, Angelo and Lanny Poffo, to manage the Islanders, Offensica, who would later become known, of course, as the Wild Samoans in the WWF. After the Poffos had ended up dropping the Detroit version of the World Tag Team Championships to Fred Curry and Hank James, that would lead into a feud between the Poffos and the Samoans, and then of course Randy Poffo, aka Randy Savage, would also be involved in that as well, as the Poffos would start teaming with him as well in that feud. And also, Bobo Brazil would make his return to the Detroit area to re-engage in his feud with Sheik over the Detroit version of the NWA United States Heavyweight title. Now, as we head over to the Central States territory from Detroit, Ed Wiskowski, who would later become known as would probably be best known for his time in the AWA as Colonel De Beers, would continue his dominant reign as the Central States Heavyweight Champion during this time in July of '75, fending off the likes of like Mike George and the Oates brothers, Jerry and Ted Oates, who are also the Central States versions of the World Tag Team Champions. moved down south to the tri-state area of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, we would find, of course, there after completing his title defenses, of course, in Stampede Wrestling, in the latter half of July, Hiro Matsuda would return to the tri-state area and would be defending the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title against the likes of course, of former champions Ken Mantell and Danny Hodge. Danny Hodge, of course, in which he was reigniting his feud with Danny Hodge. Then, as we head over to Texas, as we head over to Big Time Wrestling in Dallas, as well as Western States, of course, his after his tour, after his Canadian tour in the first half of the month, Jack Briscoe would come down to Texas to defend the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against the likes of the one half of the NWA Texas Tag Team Champions, Al Madrill, as well as Brass Knuckles champion Mad Dog Vachon, and Killer Brooks and Terry Funk representing NWA Western States. So that was a big story going on in Texas. And as we come out to California, one of the big rivalries going on at the time was in Hollywood, in NWA Hollywood, over the NWA America's Tag Team Championship, as the title would be kind of swapped back and forth between the Hollywood Blondes, led by their manager Sir Oliver Humperdinck, and Black Gordman and Great Goliath, in what could be considered a rare heel on heel feud. Then, as we head north to Northern California, head into the San Francisco area, Big Time Wrestling up there. You'd have Angelo Mosca coming in to defeat, engage in a feud with Pat Patterson over the San Francisco version of the United States Heavyweight Championship, in which he would eventually defeat him for that title. As well as, of course, Patterson and High Chief Peter Maivia being involved in a feud with the Invaders over the World Tag Team Championships. As we head over to the AWA territory at the monthly Chicago show, Verne Gagne would retain his AWA World Heavyweight Championship by a DQ over Baron von Raschke, and also Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens would retain the AWA World Tag Team titles over the tag team of Crusher and Dusty Rhodes, as Dusty Rhodes was now back in the territory, back in the AWA territory for a time. As we head over to Ohio and take a look at the IWA at the time, the International Wrestling Association, the big rivalry that was happening there at the time was between the reigning IWA North American Heavyweight Champion Bulldog Brower versus the powerhouse from Dearborn, Michigan, Mighty Igor. And basically, Brower had retained his title against Igor over their matches, but Igor, having been a regular in the upper Midwest region of Michigan and Ohio, they were engaged in a feud here at the time. So yeah. Now, as we head down to Mexico to finish this all off, on the 26th, aside from defending the IWA World Heavyweight title in the IWA against the likes of Nikita Koloff. Mil Mascaras would also take the title down to Mexico to the on July the 26th of 1975, where he would defend the title at the La Plaza de Toros arena against former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Lou Thesz, and he would retain the title against Lou Thesz 2-1. So with all that, then, of course, now that concludes our look back at July 1975 in the world of pro wrestling. Hopefully, I was able to bring you up at least a little bit on some of the storylines and title situations happening at the time. Um, if you guys would like to contact me directly, my Discord is in the links below. Also, if you guys like this content, I'd ask that you like, comment, share, and subscribe. I always look forward to conversations with you guys as long as they're civil and respectful. Um, and I hope you guys will check this out. So, and I will see you later. Bye.